Hi, everyone. Welcome to Developing and Administrating a Community Survey. This is workshop 4 of 5. The purpose of the workshops, these are made possible by the Northwest Native Language Resource Grant, which is funded by the Office of Indian Education. This is a series of 15 workshops and will cover community-based planning and design and developments. The workshops cover the fundamentals necessary to learn tools, techniques, and processes to develop a community-based project plan. I am your presenter today. My name is Kelly LaChance, and I am a citizen of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz. So our learning objectives today are to understand how to design a culturally relevant survey, choose effective methods for distribution, and interpret and use survey results responsibly. Today's agenda will go over the benefits of surveys, steps to design and test, best practices for collecting community input. So why use surveys? So what is the need for surveys? Well, they are one of the most effective ways to gather information efficiently. They also help to validate the direction that you want to take within your project. And it's a great way to identify your needs and support, and also to go and to monitor program impact based on your survey and where you may be at currently with your project. And it's also a good way that you could utilize that information to support your funding and any type of advocacy work, and also to assess your engagement and any barriers that you may have. So let's talk a little bit about the design process. What you will need to start off with first is to identify your purpose, why you are designing this survey, what is it going to be used for, and then also choose your audience. Most likely it will go to your community and folks in which you are seeking information from. And then from there, you will draft your questions. And it's kind of a recommendation that in the process of drafting your questions, you want to be able to maybe include other folks that could help you draft those questions, especially if there's a variety of information that you are needing to gather. That is a good strategy to use. And once you have your survey designed, it is always recommended to do a pilot test. So you can send it to folks in your organization or maybe some folks outside of the organization that can take the survey. And with that, they give you kind of feedback if on questions, if this question or that question seemed like it needed to get some revision, then they can give you that feedback. And they'll also give you the feedback on the ease of using the survey as well. So this is just an overview of the design process. There are like more in-depth things, and we will go into those as well. So once you have that, then you can go and finalize your survey and send it out. So in writing questions, we just talked about this a little bit. So writing your questions, you want to like avoid any kind of jargon or any type of loaded terms. You want to keep your community in mind with how you are developing the questions. So you want to make the questions easy and understandable for them to understand and also to be able to answer adequately. And that's where we go. And to this next one is that you want to use plain and clear language. And then also consider accessibility. You probably want to do an accessibility check, especially if this is going out to a wide range of folks within your community and elders. And you want to make this so that it's readable and easy to follow as well. And then in writing your questions, you want to also consider what types of questions that you want to develop. Either quantitative, where you're just gathering information and numbers that you want to use, versus qualitative, where you're developing open-ended questions and folks will be responding to those answers in text box. So these are all things to consider in writing your questions. So here's some example of closed and open questions. So let's take a look at here. So for quantitative data, here are some closed-in questions to look at here. So in quantitative, the answers are usually fixed, and they are usually yes or no. And that includes like multiple choice and any type of rating scales. And so because responses fit into categories, this is easily being able to be measured and analyzed. So that's the positive side, the best side of using quantitative. It is very easy to measure and to analyze. Now let's look at here at this example. So if 18 students say yes and 12 say no, those numbers become quantitative data. So that's just an example of what quantitative data means. So let's look over here at the open-ended questions, qualitative data. So these responses are descriptive and cannot be directly counted in the same way as quantitative. So instead of numbers, you are analyzing themes, patterns, experience, or meanings that you may want to put into categories. So in doing this, you want to think about, when you're designing your qualitative questions, what is the information that you're wanting to collect? Are there themes that you want to look at in collecting this information? So that's important to think about that. So when you gather these questions and these answers, you'll be able to collect that information for that specific theme. So let's look at this example here. What has your personal journey of learning your native language been like, and what experiences have most shaped that process? So this just is an example of a qualitative question. And I think in looking at a theme here, what it is that the question is about is process and also their experience in learning their native language. So let's continue to look at some more qualitative and quantitative questions here. Let's look at these qualitative examples to give you some more ideas for designing your own. So, how has participation in language revitalization activities influenced your connection to your culture and community? What personal experiences or motivations have encouraged you to become involved in revitalizing your native language? So once again, qualitative is like an open question that you're asking folks. And so they would be filling this information into a text box on your survey. Now, looking here at the quantitative examples, again, these would be information that we previously talked about, to where there'd be different ways to quantify this information. And you could use that to also inform your qualitative as well, but this is a great way to assess any type of numbers or responses that you're looking for. So let's look at these questions. How many hours per week do you spend participating in native language learning or revitalization activities? How often do you use your native language in daily conversations? Never, rarely, sometimes, often, always. So see, the last one was very descriptive and is what you would be looking for in developing a quantitative question. So these are just some examples that you can look at and think about as you move along in your own process. So when you get ready to send out the materials and you're ready for the next steps, what you want to think about, especially in your own community, is what is the best way to do that? Is the best way to provide paper surveys at events. So when you go to different events or even plan events, you can have paper surveys available. And if within your community, door to door or by mail would be a great way, is that you could also do this as well. So you want to be thinking about like what is the best way to get this information to your community. And then also online platforms. So in online platforms, that is a great way as well. So this is where you would develop an electronic survey, like for example, through Google Forms. And you could send this link out through email to folks as well. And then there's also the in-person option, considering people with accessibility needs, that is another great way to be able to have your surveys out there and to have the most responses that you can. Now, another thing to look at as well is incentives and accessibility. So what you want to look at in gaining interest in your survey is, do you want to offer incentives? And a lot of programs do offer incentives for completing surveys. So in doing so, you might want to consider like gift cards or any types of prizes. And especially if you are doing like a community meeting that we talked about earlier, food is another option as well. And also, in a lot of our communities, we do have elders who talk their traditional languages. And so you want to consider that as well, your community. And if there is any type of translations or even bilingual versions. So if these need to be put within your language to help your elders, that's always a great thing to do. And that leads us to also supporting elders, like if they do need help, reading the survey, you could have someone there, or if they have someone in their family, or someone that is a part of the project to help them as they take their survey. That's always a great thing. Now, let's look at analyze and sharing results. So in that process, what you are going to be doing is identifying key patterns or themes. And so once you have that, so we talked a little bit about that with the qualitative and the quantitative in looking at your themes. And so what next you will do is, when you have analyzed and identified all the patterns and the themes, you will then share that with your community. And that's a great thing as well. You do want to be able to get this information out there and share that with your community so they can understand the results and you want them to look at this so they can further participate as well as a participant, but also know what is the state of things within the language and the project that is taking place there. So that is very informative. And that also continues the community participation. And so once you have that information, of course, you want to be able to use that to inform your next steps for your project. So let's take a look at these results from example questions. So let's look at these qualitative findings. So these are examples of key themes from open-ended question. So there are 3 themes here. There's cultural connection, there's motivation, and then there's personal growth. So looking at cultural connection, we see that learning the language strengthens ties to heritage and community. So let's look at the motivation theme, and from that, desire to honor elders, preserve the language, and pass it on to children. So those were the themes that, and this overall results of motivation. So let's look at personal growth and look at those qualitative findings and key themes from that. And it says that participants felt empowered, responsible, and more culturally aware. So in this process as well, you may want to collect quotes, which are very powerful to use within your assessments as well. So let's look at these quotes here. This one says, "I feel empowered when I can communicate in our language." And so the next quote is, "Seeing the language almost disappear motivated me to help preserve it." Now let's move over here to the quantitative findings. And in this, it looks like hours per week in language was the focus. So the quantitative questions were focused on frequency of daily use, and then frequency of daily language use. Oh, these are both the same thing. So it looks like both of them were focused on frequency of daily use. So let's take a look here. So it looks like never was 1, rarely was 2, sometimes was 4, and often was 3, and always was 0. So in looking at the frequency of daily use, you can go ahead and average those hours. And so the daily language use was 2.7 hours per week in language activities. And so this is also great information that you could use in your project, but also information that you could use to compare as you progress in your project. You can go back and say, okay, at that time, the average use per week was 2.7 hours. So let's take a look at this activity prompt here. So the questions are, how would you share your community results? So brainstorm 3 survey questions you might ask in your community and utilize the examples like the qualitative or the quantitative that we reviewed and reflect on those and think about how you would share your community results based on the information that we covered as well. So what you can do is if you want to pause the video, you can go ahead and do that and write those down and use those as you move along through these upcoming workshops. And if not, you can go ahead and move forward within the presentation. So let's look at the key takeaways on what we covered today. So today, we looked at designing surveys to reflect the needs of the communities. So what that means again is we looked at how you can design your qualitative and quantitative questions to do so. And also delivery matters much as design. So we looked at ways that you could collect that information from your community and different ways that you could do that, either electronically or meetings or paper. And then also how you can think about the results, what you would like the results to be like. For example, in the qualitative, you first establish your themes. And so those results, qualitative results, you could think of like, oh, yeah, those are like a gift. And and that is really a lot of good information. So if you were thinking about those specific themes that you were wanting to gather, those results will help inform your survey and your project. And then putting together your quantitative and a qualitative also offers you a wider picture in how you could plan your project and as well as to see what are the needs within your community. So we are at the end of our workshop today. And so moving ahead, workshop 5 is going to be assessing community readiness. And so thank you again, and I hope to see you in the next upcoming workshop. Thank you, and you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.